Life and business can be easy, but us silly humans love getting in our own way. My name is Nico Rapclis, and I've had a wild journey. From releasing traumas that I held on to for decades, to playing college athletics, working with multi-million-dollar brands, having a spiritual awakening, and now coaching incredible humans navigate their inner and outer world. The Just Grow podcast is my outlet to share and help others with life and business. After investing north of $100,000 into my personal and professional development, the Woo Plus Do formula is what has served me best. A healthy combination of mindset, energetics, consciousness, spirituality, self-healing, and discovery, matched with a high-level strategy, principles, focus, optimization, and accountability to help you be, do, and have everything that has been placed in your heart. This podcast is for the impact-driven entrepreneur that is finally ready to start thriving internally and externally. Welcome to Just Grow. Yo, what's happening, my friends? Welcome to the Just Grow podcast. So excited to have you on this particular episode. This is with my new friend, Kelly Cardenas. So interesting story about Kelly is I met him at an event called Secret Knock. It's put on by Greg Reed, who he's published around 150 books, and he's just a really impressive guy. And he brought this room of nearly 300 high-level business owners that were very emotionally intelligent and just heart-centered. It was a really cool event, and Kelly was one of the speakers at the event. In fact, he was one of the ones that was speaking throughout the event, and he just got to share a lot of wisdom and valuable information and intel, and I really vibed with him. And his whole thing is about the vibe and making sure that the vibe is right and people feel good when they're around you, and there's a formula to that, and that's what we dug into. And so that's what he shares as he keynotes all over the country, speaking to some of the biggest corporations in the world. So you're not going to want to miss this particular episode. It's really beautiful. We talked about a wide variety of things that's really going to open up your perspective to help you become the best version of yourself. Now, before we do jump in, I want to let you know about the next Just Grow podcast live event. It'll be on May 11th at 4:30 p.m. You can go to justgrowpodcast.com to learn everything, all the information, the location, all that kind of stuff. So head on over to justgrowpodcast.com. But without further ado, let's jump into this interview with Kelly Cardenas. What up, Kelly?
How you doing, man? I feel intimidated after that. I don't know if I'm going to be able to bring that much to the table, man.
I'm so glad to have you here, man. This is really exciting because we got to meet briefly at Secret Knock. I saw you speak, and I just really resonated with your vibe, and yeah, just kind of your charisma, your enthusiasm for life, and I knew that we were meant to connect. So here we are.
Well, I appreciate it, man. And I have to tell you, you made such a phenomenal, video, and you put some stuff together, and we weren't able to show it there. But I want to honor you and tell you that you're amazing, man, and what you're doing and how you're impacting lives is phenomenal.
I appreciate that, man. Well, I mean, there's so many different directions we could go with this, but like one of the things that I really resonated with, like your whole concept of the vibe, and the thing that just like really struck me was like, don't let the smooth fool you. Because, when we talk about vibe, I think a lot of people kind of that aren't as familiar with it, they're just like, oh, that guy's got it. He's got that vibe, or he's got that charisma. And there's a formula to it. And I think a lot of different people have different formulas, and I just resonated with you. You talk about a heart set, you talk about the mindset and the skill set.
Yeah.
So I'd love to dive into that first, and then we can kind of riff off of that.
Yeah. I mean, well, the vibe for me was the missing ingredient that changed everything. Right. And so I've searched over the years, and, as we grew in business and relationships and all those things, what I realized that there was only one thing that powered everything, and that was the vibe. But then I had to look into it and see how it can be constructed. Number one, it's your heart set, which is your foundation, your belief system, your mindset, which is your intentions, and then your skill set, which is your actions. Once you get those in line, it's curtains. You create an irresistible vibe that people don't even know why they're attracted to it, but they just want to be a part of it.
Yeah. And I guess like one other thing that really resonated with me, because it's something my mom had always tell me, is treat people the way you want to be treated. And, to some degree, I think like when I was younger, it kind of sounded corny, but like what you said, the vibe is really how people feel when you leave.
Well, I think we would switch it though, right? So I would say, and I respect Mama, but what I would do is I'd push back on it a little bit. Like people would tell us all the time, to treat people the way that you want to be treated, but then that's being selfish. And so if you treat people the way that they want to be treated, the only way that we could do that is by being present with them. And what I find is the only way that you can be truly present with somebody is if you're okay with you. And if your stuff is in line and is congruent and consistent, right? So if your heart set, your beliefs are in line with the intentions you walk into the room with, your mindset, and your skill set is in line with that, which is your actions, it's amazing what can happen, but most of us lead the other way. So we look to see what's the hacks in life. What are the actionable items that I can do? So I just look for the actions that I can do and I build my life on it. But that is, it's a wobbly foundation, right? And
Mm.
so we do that. And then we think, hopefully it'll seep into my mind. And at some point it'll move into my heart. And if we flip that paradigm and we think about a triangle, and that triangle goes the heart set on the bottom of the triangle, sides of the triangle is going to be the mindset, which is the two sides of the arms. And then we go the smallest piece of real estate of that whole entire triangle is the skills. But we tend to, as humans, we flip that
Hmm.
triangle upside down and we build our house this way. So
Yeah.
think about it this way, Nico. Imagine if you were just present with people and said, I'm not going to treat you the way that I want to be treated. I'm going to treat you the way that you want to be treated. There's the golden rule that you said, but the platinum rule is to treat
Ooh,
people the way that they want to be treated.
wow. There's a lot of wisdom in that one. Wow, kind of blew my mind there because I've been living by the golden rule for so long. I didn't realize there was a next level of platinum.
Well, I mean, and I want to respect I want to respect mama because what she was probably saying is like, and what she meant by it. Well, I don't know mama, but I respect her and I love her. But that she was saying, like, be kind to people, like be truly kind to people, like truly contribute. And if you can contribute to people, people want to be around you. Why? Because they feel good. It's not because you feel good when you walk in, it's
Hmm.
because they feel good when you leave.
Amen. You said something early in that was you don't feel like people are present because they're not okay with themselves. They're not good with themselves. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's just because we don't get enough encouragement, right? I got encouragement. We call it speaking life. And what speaking life is using your name, Nico, and telling you that your video that you've rolled before was absolutely phenomenal. To see that you have invested $100,000 into your personal and professional development is unbelievable. That's me speaking life because it's very specific. But if I give you an overarching compliment and say to you, Nico, you're awesome all the time, it doesn't mean anything. It's as if I never said it. So if I can truly speak life to somebody, right? Use their name and use some specific that they did. I just got life spoken to me by my buddy Greg Reed this morning. I got on the phone
Hey.
with him and he said, Hey
Mhm.
man, you make a great first impression. I told him about you and that I was going to be on the podcast. He was so excited and he wanted to say hello. But he also spoke life into me. He spoke specifics. He said that, you make a good first impression. I'm proud of you. You have a dynamic personality. All these things that as I walked away, I was lifted up. And I think the reason why most people or most of us struggle with being present is because we don't get enough encouragement because, it's the thing that's free, right? It has the highest ROI, but it is probably the hardest thing for people to do for other people is to encourage them because they think that they're going to take their lunch.
Mm. What do you mean by that?
I
Take
mean,
them.
think about this, like people in your space, right? So where you're coaching and things like that, it's not the number one thing for you to reach out and speak life to every single other coach that's in your space. Why? Because sometimes people think that if I promote everybody else, then I'm not going to get mine. It's exactly opposite. And so
Mhm.
it's a thing that I've started on social media. And if you see me on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, I'm always promoting my friends because I love when my friends win. And I have friends in the speaking space. I'm in the keynote speaking space, and the number one motivational speaker in the world is James Dixon. I
Yes.
love to promote him. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it's going to take away any shine of mine, but that part, being able to congratulate, love on people, and speak life into people comes from being okay with your heart set, your belief system, your intentions, which is your mindset, and your skill set, being okay in that realm, that means that you can promote everyone else around you, and you're not in fear of them taking what you think would be yours.
So good. I mean, what I hear is collaboration, is like building other people up with you. Like we all win together. There's no such thing as competition. And when we have that mindset, that's what like we're gearing up for our next live podcast event. And this one we're doing a little bit different. We're incorporating so much more collaboration. We're having a few different people like we're gonna have them in the back room and like asking people what their dreams are because I our friend has a agency that's called Dreamer and that's like kind of their ethos behind it.
Uh-huh.
And then we're getting some content creators to come in and collaborate. We can shout them at. It's like it's just this whole fusion of collaboration. And I feel like I don't understand when people are just like trying to make it about them because it's like you're doing it alone and then people don't want to collaborate with you. I don't get that. So I love that you saying it's just like, let's all do it together. Let's all win together. Let's all build each other up together. And when we all build each other up together, we're all doing what we're meant to do. And then this world's a better place.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Tell me more about the Vibe Room because I want to hear more about that because I started doing live podcasts in front of audiences and I never heard of anybody else doing it. And then when I found your stuff, I saw that you did the Vibe Room and I was like, damn, that's amazing. So where did that come from?
Well, it was just a silly idea from my side. It's a great idea on your side, silly idea on my side. I watched David Letterman's the My Next Guest Needs No Introduction, and my wife and I were watching it during the pandemic. And I said, "Baby, I'd love to do that." She's like, "What?" And I said, "I'd love to put on an event like that." And I actually hadn't even started the podcast at the time, but I wanted to have the TV show part of it. And then when I started doing the podcast, I'm very fortunate to have really, really cool friends. And when you have really, really cool friends, you don't have to be good at anything. Like I have you in my life, so I don't have to be good at what you're doing because you're already great at it. So that way, as I collect friends throughout my life, I got to have them on the podcast. And I mean, from anywhere from Lee Steinberg to general manager of the Tennessee Titans to Eddie George to John Gordon to I just had Master G from the Sugar Hill Gang on the other day. But also the unsung heroes, the dads who were truck drivers who built it up, and now their daughters are going to Division I colleges with scholarships, like people like that. And the more and more that I grew with the podcast, what I had happen was people asked me like, "Can I meet these people? Could I be in the studio?" And then so we created the live event, and the Vibe Room's in a 60s speakeasy jazz club. We've been doing it in Salt Lake City at the Edison House, and it's unbelievable. We add the musical element to it. It's like you have comedy, you have personal development, you have music, and it's not the people that are on the stage that are most important, it's the people in the audience that you get to connect with. So
Mm-hmm. Yes. 'Cause it's so amazing. I mean, just like at Secret Knock, like there's so many amazing people there. And when you put amazing people in a room together, it's just the vibes there, right?
absolutely, man.
Tell me more about speaking, because I mean, when I asked you before, even before we jumped on, I could feel you light up about speaking.
Yeah.
So where does that come from? Why is that so invigorating to you?
Well, I think it's big because it's just telling the story. So I don't ever talk about anything that I don't do.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of like when I first got into it, and this was years ago. I've been speaking publicly for 30 years, and so but I really honed in and focused and said, this is the only thing that I want to do. We own salons all over the country. Before we sold the salons, and I said, look to my wife, I want to just speak and I want to do the podcast. And but the reason why it's so important to me is because I wanted to be able to tell the real stories where, and not a knock against anybody, but the
Yeah.
point of difference is that we actually did it. Like we built companies, we built people, we built cultures, we built like brick and mortar places, and not just brick and mortar places are the only types of businesses, but we built those things and then we told the story as opposed to coming up with a theory and seeing if it worked. And so but it's been amazing, man. I mean, it's one of those things. God told me in 1997 that He would put me in a place that when I spoke, then people had to listen, and when they listened, they'd hear His voice and not mine. And if I ever got to the point where I felt that it was my voice and not God's voice, He would take it all away. So I stay
Mhm.
humble in that too. But I'm very, very grateful that I get a chance to do exactly what I love for exactly who I love and with exactly who I love. So, I mean, getting to be able to travel the country, speak to companies like a Sport Clips that I'm going to do. Just got done with real estate spring break, so speaking in the real estate industry, and then into the #1 digital marketing conference in the world. That's NiftyCon that's coming up, but it's amazing because it's all about the vibe. Like your leadership doesn't matter, your culture is irrelevant. Your systems will never work if the vibe is off. And how can we construct the vibe? Heart set, mindset, skill set, line it, irresistible vibe, bang, bang, bang.
You're polished, man. I love it. Just I could sit here and listen to you. So and obviously like it sounds like you're like bouncing around. It doesn't really, it's not necessarily one specific niche. You're real estate, digital marketing, like you can do it all.
People. That's all. If you, I mean, in a company, if the company has people, right? So what my pops taught me very early on, my pops is my best friend in the world. He taught me that, first you build the people, then you allow the people to build the business. How
Mhm.
do you build the people? People only need two things, right? They only need to feel seen and feel heard. And most people don't have those two things in a company. And most of the time, the reason why a person hasn't locked in the culture, when I say the culture doesn't matter or it's irrelevant, you could choose any type of culture you want, right? There's 100 million of them. There's 100 million leadership styles. There's different books and all these things. There's tons of different systems, but none of it will engage unless your people feel good about it. And so for me, that's what I've locked into. And when I work with companies, organizations, and conferences, they bring me in to help them establish the way that people feel about what they're doing. And once we do that, it's curtains. Like, I mean, when you feel good about a certain regiment, you'll do it. When you feel
Mhm.
good about a podcast, you'll listen to it. What's the difference between you buying a car at a certain dealership and not buying the car? It's not the car, it's not the price, it's because the way you feel. And so if you want to make price drop away, your offering drop away, and your product drop away, and it just be about like the person consuming it, it's just the way that they feel, which is the vibe.
I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's all anybody wants. Like even you talk about a car, like someone wants a Ferrari. It's not even necessarily the Ferrari. It's like, how does it make them feel when they're driving in that Ferrari and people are looking at them? And
Uh-huh.
so it is. And it's just, I find it interesting because it's like the vibe or the feeling. It's like that thing that you can't necessarily see. And that's why it's historically speaking has been more challenging to grasp. But I think as we're entering kind of, I feel like kind of like even a new stage of life and the world is evolving. Like people are starting to like understand this stuff more and it's becoming more popular and people are resonating with it more. And um, yeah, I mean, I guess that would be even a question is like, how did you come up against this stuff? Because again, I would say not, again, because of the fact that it's not something that you can see, it's harder to grasp.
Well, I think it's because of my parents, and I was very, very fortunate growing up. And I had my mom. I didn't know that she was setting, helping me to create a heart set, and my pops. But my mom said to me every day that I was awesome. Right, separate myself from my accomplishments. I was beautiful. Never compare myself to anyone. Number three was that I could do anything, but just because I could do it didn't make it my purpose. And these were things that I learned the meanings of. They said them over and over again, but I got mad at it because I was like, you're being redundant. But then when my mom passed away, I realized what she meant by what she said. And then my pops would sum it up like this. He would say, you're the greatest boy. So
Mm,
act accordingly.
yeah.
Right. And imagine if you had that in you, that you, Nico, you separated yourself from your accomplishment. Anything you went into, you did, you gave yourself permission to try, and you gave yourself the wings to be able to do that. Right. And you separated yourself from the actual accomplishment. And you just said, like, I want to do this. I think that it's right. I'm going to go and do it. And then you didn't compare yourself to anyone, which is comparison is the thief of all joy, right?
Hmm.
And joy is nothing more than falling in love with your current circumstances and allowing magic to happen. Happiness, which everyone sells us on, is based on circumstances. So if I have something happen, I'm happy. If it doesn't happen, I'm sad. But that's happiness and sadness. I choose joy. You could choose joy every single day, right? And then imagine if you knew that you could do anything that you put your mind to, but just because you could do it didn't make it your purpose. And there's so many people out there that are doing things because they compared themselves or they thought, if I get this accomplishment, it'll do that. It'll make me feel this way.
Hmm.
So when that became my heart set, my mindset, which was, my intentions was simply to be kind, right? Contribute to any, environment that I walked into, make a ton of friends like you, because you're awesome at what you're doing, and then stay really curious, ask you questions, wonder what you do, because I already know what I do, right? And then my actions, when I added my actions to it, which was just one word, which was relentless. Now, if I have a relentless spirit saying like a pit bull mentality, I lock onto it and I lock my jaws and I don't let go until I either take the limb or you kill me. Either one is fine with me,
Mm.
right? So when I lead with my heart, then I add my mind, then I add my skills. It's different than when I walk in, and most people are doing this, when I walk in relentless and I'm just getting anything I want. And then I'm going to be kind, and then I'm going to make friends. It doesn't work that way. It has a lot of collateral damage, right?
Mhm.
So all of it bases back to my parents. And I know this sounds overarching too, Nico, but what I want you to think of on this, like a consumable thing for today, right? When I say heart set, mindset, skill set, sometimes people are like, oh, wow, that's overarching, but how can I do it today? Here's how you could do it today. Number one, ask yourself, what am I concerned with today? Like right now, in this moment, what am I concerned with? That would be your heart set. What do I wish would happen? Right? In your mind, what do you wish that would happen in this situation? What am I concerned with? What do I wish that would happen? What do I wish would happen? And number three, what are you willing to do right now to be able to get what you wish?
Mhm.
That's your actions or your
Mhm.
skill set. So your heart set, your mindset, skill set, and it could be broken down into bite-sized pieces. And when we start to ask ourselves, what are we concerned with? What do we wish would happen? What am I willing to do? Now you start to align it. And it's amazing because when you start to align those things, people can't help but want to help you. They can't help but want to be around you, consume your product, whatever it is. And I tell you, that's the feeling that they have about you. It's not the feeling that you think that you're bringing into the room.
Mm. Well, I think that that ties into one thing you said earlier that I really resonate with. It's congruence. So your mindset, your heart set, your actions, everything. Like it's all congruent. There's no, I think that's like also a way to say authenticity. And then therefore the vibe, because you can't fake the vibe.
Huh.
But
I
when
mean,
you're
you can't,
authentic.
you really can't, man. I mean, it's like faking the funk, right? And the sad thing is, is there's a lot of people who look at the system and they look at the system. What are the actionable things that I can do? But that's the same as the dude who got Ed Hardy jeans, shirt, and hat too late. You know the guy that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The guy that says,
Immediately.
if I have the Ferrari, if I have the jeans, if I have then I'll get the girl. No, you won't. You got to have game. And game doesn't come in a system. Game comes from your heart. So you got to start with the heart. Then it goes to your mind. Then it goes to your skills. But if you lead with the skills, then you're just that dude that got Ed Hardy 3 years too late, walking up in the club being like, where's the ladies at? And none of them are coming home with you.
Oh man, I've never heard that before, but it instantly just I see that guy.
We all see that guy, right? Think of this, right? Okay, close your eyes for a second, Nico. I want you to think about when you went onto the car lot and you went to the used car side. And then that guy came out, and you see him right now, and he's walking out towards you. He has kind of a shiny suit. He has some really strong, like Axe body spray or Dracar on, or Cool Water or Obsession from Calvin Klein, and it's just stanking. And he comes right at you, and he says, "What can I do to get you to take home a car today?" Let me ask you this, Nico. How do you feel right now?
Get away from me.
Exactly. That's the vibe, right? That's the
Yeah.
vibe. That's the difference between a person buying your product and not. It doesn't have to do with the price, because I could tell you this. I worked in a market where my price was so outrageous comparatively to other people, but people felt great, so they kept coming back.
Mhm. And that you're talking about the salons on that?
Anything. I mean, I charge, like in the salons, I charged an exorbitant amount. I mean, it was ridiculous, but I had people fly from all over the country and all over the world to be able to come and see me. Same thing in the speaking world. I'm not a cheap speaker. I'm not for your bar mitzvah, right? I mean, unless your bar mitzvah is pretty big. But what's nuts about it is it's the way in which people feel about it, right? So most people compete on price or on offering, and that just puts you in the commodity business as opposed to the experience business. And I'm in the
Mhm.
experience business. I want people to feel amazing when they leave.
Yes. Like that's one of my highest values is experience. Like giving people something that they want to go home and talk about and share with people. And a quote, I think it was from Ferrari, but I know Greg was mentioning this. Might have been
It was Lamborghini.
Lamborghini, that's correct.
Yep.
If you create a product, service, or experience that people save money to buy, you'll never have to worry about money again. And that just like that resonated so much is like, how do you continue to give people the best experience so that they have the best feeling and then they just want to rave about it to everybody? And that's how you build something special.
I think it comes back to a thing that my pops taught me very early on. No matter what you're charging, always give them double or triple the value, right? And not your value, but their value. Because some people, like,
Yeah.
this is nuts because some people with the service, they don't value just the product. Maybe they value the amount of time that you take while you're doing it. So we always called it timing, technique, and entertainment. Timing, technique, entertainment. If one of those things are off, you're unstable. If you have the technique and you have the entertainment, but you're slow, you're the stinky kid. If you have timing, you're fast with it. You don't have technique, but you can entertain people. You'll always be susceptible to a person who could do it at the same amount of time with a better technique and can entertain them. If you have timing, you have technique, but you don't have entertainment, people don't want to be around you because they don't feel good. But when you have all three, that's the holy grail.
Ooh, that's good. I want to come back and listen to that one. Let me hear about, well, gosh, I have so many questions. We can say for
I'm
hours.
here, man. Hey, I'm here. I love this, man. This is the greatest thing. I was so excited to be able to spend time with you. And you know, I was bragging to my wife this morning. I was bragging to Greg Reed this morning, and I'm telling all my friends. So, man, we're here, dude. Let's go.
Let's do it. Well, one thing I wanted to riff on a little bit, you talked about, you charge exorbitant amount of prices and you've been doing this for a while and you have that confidence to do that. What would you even say to somebody that's like they have a good vibe, they have the three prongs that you just talked about, but maybe even they're just starting out or they're having a little bit of a lack of belief on like, am I worthy of charging those type of prices? Like maybe even share your journey a little bit on how you got to the point where you're charging this amount of money.
Well, I would tell you that you're not worth it at that point, right? So when you're first starting out, be okay. And this is where the world lies to you. And we hear so many things like charge your value, know your worth. Yeah, you should know your worth. If you just started in a business, then you're worth minimum wage, like at most, not in California, because minimum wage in California is like $5 million an hour, right? But to understand and to be humble and say, like, I'm willing to put in the work. Like, that's the part that most people won't talk about because it's nasty, it's dirty, and it's not shiny. It's not something that you could promote to a lot of people because it's not shiny. Like, put in the work, put in the reps. Think about it this way. When I started in the professional beauty industry, right? And I started off doing hair, like, there's only two ways to get better. There's only two. Like, you got to do a lot of hair, right? And so that either takes a ton of time or you can just do more in a day than what other people were doing. So for me, I looked at it and I said, how can I get around someone who does way more than me? Right. And then I just be their number one guy. So when I got into it, we would do anywhere from 17 to 25 guests in a day, where a normal stylist would do 4. Okay, let's do math.
Yeah.
Let's just round it to 20. That means in one day I would do 20, where a normal hairdresser would do 4. Nico, I was doing 5 times the amount of stuff. I'm not saying I was good. I'm just saying I was doing it.
Mhm.
So what happened is when I'd work one day, a hairdresser that was next to me had to work 5 days. When I worked 1 year, they had to work 5 years. When
Jeez.
I worked 2 years, they had to work 10. When I worked 3 years, they had to work 15. By the time I worked 4 years, you couldn't even compete when we weren't on the same planet.
Mm-mm.
But I think one of the biggest things that I want to encourage every one of you out there is get run. If you're just starting in the speaking side, speak at every chamber of commerce, speak at every single thing that you possibly can do. And most likely you're not going to get paid for it. That's okay. If you do the things over and over again, and maybe you're not getting paid, there'll be the day where you get paid for the things that you do. But most people aren't willing to do that work. And also, too, I want you to realize that the rule of 10 is in effect, right? So most people, when they start off early, they're like, yo, how can I hack the system? How can I jump ahead? I can tell you this. If you jump ahead, what's going to happen is your alligator mouth is going to overload your parakeet ass. And that's what my pops would always say. You're going to get yourself into places that you can't deliver. And once
Mhm.
that happens, the rule of 10 comes into play. And what the rule of 10 is for every one person that you touch, They're either going to tell 10 to come and see you or 10 to go away from you. And let's do the multiples there. If I come in contact with one person, Nico, I love you and I want to add value to you. You're going to go out and tell 10 friends, hey, Kelly should be on your podcast. Kelly should come and be at your, your live podcast. You should have Kelly come and speak at your company or organization. Awesome. Let's flip it around. I'm not that cool of a guy or not that nice of a guy, or I make you feel like an idiot, or I'm talk down to you or whatever it is. Now you're going to go tell 10 people. Let's think of the multiples on that. One person tells 10. Those 10 tell 10. That's 100. Those 100 tell 10. That's 1,000. Within 3 generations, I've already touched 1,000 people, but most people are focused on the masses. How many followers can I get? As opposed to talking to the one person that's right in front of you and making them feel amazing, which is the vibe.
It always comes back to that. It'll never not.
But that I would say to a young kid, get reps, get as many as you possibly can. Like, and I'm telling you, like for me, I want to, when I joked about the bar mitzvah, things like that, like I want to speak every single place that I can at any time, anywhere, all the time. I started doing, I'll tell you about this, about the podcast, right? So a busy podcaster, as you know, does 52 episodes in a year. Okay. That's a busy podcaster. That's a person that you're like, hats off to you. Great job. Nico, since January 6th, I've done 98. And that's not in the can. That's produced, done, all done, clips done, and put out. Look on the podcast. That was on January 6th. It was episode 318, and we are today. And I'll release yours. I'm going to actually release this one on mine. This will be 417. I did 416 yesterday. I'll do another one after we're done. There's nothing that can compare with that. Like I've done almost 100, and I'm not saying I'm better. I'm just saying I'm better than I was, because since January 6th, I've already done 2 years worth of work.
Yes.
Does that make sense? So get the reps, know your value, which is nothing, and check your ego and be willing to do the work. And when you're willing to do the work, there's nothing bad that will ever happen from you working your land. And my land right now is speaking and podcasting.
I love that. And I'm such a big advocate of podcasting too, because I think interviews are amazing. I think solo episodes are amazing. And I think just overall encompassing, it helps you become a far better speaker. And when you put in those reps, it's just like you said, it's like no one can really compete with you. But I know like my communication skills has amplified 10x ever since I started this. And it just, that's, I would say like one of the best things that I've done in terms of like me becoming a better speaker is just like constantly opening my mouth and having conversations and just speaking to the camera.
Absolutely, man. And I think one of the biggest things for if you're starting off in podcasting is, it's a thing that I don't work with everyone on this, but I do work with people who are very serious about it and the workflow. So for me, the workflow is the biggest part. So we have the fastest turnaround in the podcast industry, meaning that from the time we record till the time it's on YouTube and on all 10 platforms, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast, everywhere out there, Amazon, it's about 45 minutes and you have your 3 clips to your guest. Well, that takes workflow, that takes system, right? And so when we work and set up podcasts for people, it's because most of the people won't do a podcast because it's so cumbersome. It takes so long. I do a podcast and then 4 or 5, 6, 7 weeks later, it comes out. Whereas if you can do it now and you can get that out there, like yesterday I did 415 and 416. And within, 45 minutes, it was on all platforms and clips were done. Wow. So these are things that you're seeing in real time. And I don't suggest that for anyone, but if it is that type of person that wants to be able to get the run, get the reps, have the workflow where it's not cumbersome, that's who we work with.
Yeah. Okay. I love that because I resonated with it fully because throughout this journey, today we published our 103rd episode. So excited about that. And it's been a journey to get there because it has been cumbersome. And in the early stages, I was doing all the editing and it started to become a lot.
Well, how challenging is it though, man, when you release a podcast, right? Or when you record a podcast and then, but imagine when you recorded it, it went to a place, you have a system, and literally, I'm just a systems guy. I always like to break it down to the lowest common denominator. So imagine if within 45 minutes of us getting done, I got my clips. Do you think I'm more apt to share that clip on social?
Yeah, of course.
Now, if I wait 6 weeks to be able to get it, how hyped am I about that? I'm not. I don't even remember what I said 6 weeks ago. Right. And so this part of podcasting and what it can do is it's amazing because for me, with doing almost 100 episodes, 98 episodes since January 6th, do you imagine, like, I don't really have to film for social media. My marketing is already done. My PR is already done. And so that's why people come to us and say, like, okay, this is what we want to do. And we want to make it, we want to make it signature to us. We don't make it our vibe. We make it your vibe, the way that you want to feel. And we work with that workflow. And it's unbelievable what can happen when you can sit, push play, and it's done.
Yes. I love that. I'm become every day I feel like I'm becoming more of a systems guy and I've started to get much more integrated into AI. I would assume that you've started dipping your toes into that as well.
There is, but I always make sure that my AI is based in the real AI, which is actual intelligence.
Mm,
And so that's a big thing because I tell you, you can spot AI from a mile away right now.
mm,
And I was getting better and better, which is amazing. But I always want to make sure that my heart is in every single thing that I do because there's a lot of people that want to do a shortcut, that want to hack the system. But I can tell you this, getting the reps in right now, I mean, the nuts thing is we can actually show you how to clip out 3 clips from your podcast within 45 minutes and you do it, and you would do it faster than the AI would take to be able to do it.
mm.
So I'm not saying that you have to do it always, but I'm saying when you work inside of a system, and I know the system, see what we hear all the time too is work your strengths and hire your weaknesses.
Right.
But until you understand your weakness, do not hire someone to work in it because they'll take advantage of you. And I've had this
Mhm.
happen. I've had it happen with accountants. I've had it happen in different areas of business. And I've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars and into the millions because of that. But what we want to do is, it doesn't mean that I need to spend all my time doing these things, but that's why workflow is so very important. I'm working with a guy named Keith Hale, and we're setting his up on a mobile, like he's got a van, and we're setting up his podcast that way. And then
Cool.
we've got, I'm working with a guy in Salt Lake, and he has a breathwork studio. His name is Louis Hamner. He's amazing. You'll see his podcast go. He's going to work with 3 cameras, all the stuff. But again, unless he has to, want to wait on somebody else, we're going to create his workflow where he can literally push the button, record the stuff, upload, and it's actually edited in real time. That's the nut stuff. Like if
Jeez.
you watch, I tell you, Diego, watch the podcast. If you watch the podcast, I don't edit. Like it's all live and it's all there and it's raw. And I started doing an episode recently where I actually go live and then just call my friends randomly. It's called You Have to Meet My Friends.
Yep. I listened to
And
that.
my friends don't even know that they're going to be on the podcast until I ask them, are you okay with being on the podcast? And that's the kind of stuff that then you could try, you could try it out, see if it works. But the more and more it goes back to, right, we end where we began, reps over and over and over and over and over again. There's nothing, there's nothing that you'll master unless you just put in the work. And it takes time, and that's not sexy.
And I think like the other thing that I even noticed, I was on the Stairmaster listening to that episode of you calling your friend. I'm spacing it is the last one, spacing the name, but like you're like, hey, you want to be on the podcast? He's like, yeah, I'd love to. And you're like, good, you're on.
Was it my buddy Will or was it Josh Earp?
Josh Earp, the Hollywood guy?
Oh yeah, dude. And did you research him?
I haven't.
Dude, I'm telling you. And this is the crazy thing. I have some of the coolest friends in the world. I mean, Josh Earp, look him up. Look
Okay.
him up on Instagram. That dude that's the real deal. You know what I mean?
But like what I was gonna say to that is like innovation as well. And innovation comes from just testing and trying different things. Because like I'm such a big advocate of like being creative and trying different things and like listening to God, and he gives me these downloads to, hey, go do this, try this. And like it's just so fun. It's fun to do different things. It's fun to have different ideas and not like, oh, this is the model. This is the way it has to be. This is the way it's always been done. So let's just model that. Like I just don't believe in that. I like to have fun and create new different things that people never heard of. Like that's where the podcast events came from. Where we're just like, hey, this sounds like a good idea. Let's bring a bunch of cool people together and have a conversation and we'll all hang out afterwards. I had no idea if people were going to show up, but they did and they liked it. So, but I would never would have known if I didn't just do it and be innovative. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that innovation comes from freedom, right? And freedom comes from you feeling okay and feeling like you're seen and heard. And when we look in a you look in a business organization or you even look at an individual, right? So it starts off, if you think about it, it starts off with culture, right? And the culture is just an environment where people can grow. It moves into, right, process and procedure, right? So most people put process and procedure before culture, but it's not. The culture, the way that people feel, the story that they tell, and if they're connected to the story, then we go to process and procedure. Then we go to productivity, right? So productivity is one of those things where if you score it, you could grow it. If you don't score it, you don't know where you're at, right? It's like a little kid that plays basketball, they don't keep score. You don't know who wins. Someone morally wins, but you don't know who wins.
Hmm.
Then once we have the culture, we have the process and procedure, which is nothing more than a list of our screw ups. Yeah. Then we can track the productivity of it. That brings us to innovation. That gets people to feel free. And once they feel free, then the added ingredient to that after innovation is the ability to adapt immediately. And the ability to adapt immediately is so much because if you innovate, but you don't adapt immediately to it, you innovate, you have this idea, but you're not willing to put it into play, it won't work. But what powers all of it? The way in which you feel about it. When a person brings you a concept of a culture and a system or a product or process and procedure and productivity and innovation and the ability to adapt immediately, if you're not feeling it, you're not going to do it. We as humans, we don't do the rational thing. We do the reasonable thing,
Mm.
right? Because if we all did the rational thing, we would all eat less calories than we burn. We would all work out every single day. We would all spend less than we make.
Hmm.
And we would all be exponentially wealthy, all across the board. And none of this industry that we're talking right now, the personal development industry, would even exist because everyone would do the rational thing. But
Yeah.
it's not. We do the reasonable thing based off of the way that we feel at the time, which a lot of times doesn't make any sense. But when you can tap into that part, like I said, then you could take your system of whatever your system is or whatever your syntax is or whatever your product that you have, and it's just about getting people to feel good about it. And when they feel good about it and they're locked into it, then they start to own it as opposed to rent it.
Mm. Interesting. You have a system for everything.
I've just lived a lot of life, man. I mean,
Hmm.
let's be honest, Nico. How old are you, man?
36.
Okay, 36 years old. 36. Well, I actually, my family's from Utah. I could be your dad, right? And so, I mean, I'm 13 years older than you. I'm almost 49 years old. 49 years old next month, and it's just living a lot of life, right?
Hmm.
And then looking at it and saying, like, what's a system anyway? A system is nothing more than a list of your screw ups.
Yeah.
But most people want to be like, no, I've developed this system. It's great. No, no, no. You figured out what not to do because you screwed up. And once you realize and you give people that freedom, screw up as much as you want, as long as
Mhm.
you write it down and we make it better. Write it down, make it better. Right. I screw up like a ton. I screwed up with my daughter yesterday. There was an active shooter at her school. They called and, everyone was freaking out. It was a warning. We don't know if it was confirmed, but my wife said, "What should you do?" I said, "Should I run down there and get her right now?" She's like, "Well, it's locked down. You won't be able to get her." And I was like, then it's not that big of a deal. It's probably a false alarm. And my daughter called me later and she said, "Hey, Dad, can you come and get me?" I was like, "You just want to get out of school, don't you?" But then after I talked to my daughter later on the day, she was like, she had been crying for almost an hour because they were up in a closet, locked in the closet, waiting on the school to be cleared by the authorities. I was an idiot, a complete idiot. I didn't take it 100% serious, but I could tell you this. I have my phone near me. If my daughter calls right now, podcast ends and I'm going to get my daughter. That's a system, right? So we just learn from our screw ups. And when you do that, you have to stay humble because you know that you're human. You're going to screw up. You're going to make boneheaded decisions, but make as many as you would like today, just as long as you write them down, and let's make them better as we go along, as opposed to
Mm,
looking back and being like, "I'm so sorry for doing it." Don't be sorry. Just make it better in the future.
yes. Wow, that's an interesting way to look at systems. Just the list of screw ups.
Yeah.
I probably have a lot more systems than I even realized.
Well, imagine if you just did that, Nico. Imagine if you just looked at it today and you said, "Where have I screwed up? Where have I screwed up in my personal life? Where have I screwed up in my professional life? Where have I screwed up in my financial life? And where have I screwed up in my spiritual life?" And just write those things down. And then they become a system, right? Oh,
Mhm.
I shouldn't not take my woman on a date night every week because I did that for 4 months and we had challenges. Oh, wow. That's a surprise,
Yeah.
right? Oh, I spent more than I had. Oh, wow. That's a system, right? I
Mhm.
keep not learning that system. But, those things, if you take the time, and that's, the cool thing is what I wrote about in the book, The Vibe, it breaks all these components down, the culture, right? The process of procedure or systems, the productivity, the innovation, the ability to adapt immediately, but it's all powered by the vibe. And this wasn't written based off theory. This was all the boneheaded decisions that I made that because I didn't go to college and I didn't go to a business school, but we built a multi-million-dollar company that was run by like 19 to 24 year olds because we had systems in play and the systems were active and alive. So every time someone had an idea and something didn't work, we wrote it down, we made a new system and we named it after them. And now the people were owning the systems because it was theirs anyway.
Mhm. It's gonna be a little video here. What up? Well, one thing I want to dive into because I relate to you in a lot of ways, and one of the biggest ones is you had just loving parents, and uh, I'm so happy to hear that for you, and I'm so grateful for me that I had loving parents. I still have them; they're still here. I feel so fortunate and blessed, and I feel like it gave me such a leg up in this world.
Mhm.
You ever played Texas Hold'em poker?
I've never played, I've heard the song.
Okay.
Um,
Well, the way I look at it, so with Texas Hold'em, you get two cards,
yeah,
and the better your cards are, the higher probability that you're going to win. And so I kind of relate that to like how you were raised and like the parents that you had and what kind of home you were raised in.
yeah,
And I like always say that I had pocket aces that gave me the best opportunity to win. Doesn't mean I'm going to win. Your two cards doesn't ensure that you're going to win, but it gives you better probability. And so I guess I would even like to parlay this conversation into God. And I know that you talk about the Proverbs, and I've listened to a few episodes of that, and I've started diving much more into the Bible. I've been much deeper in my faith, especially even just like this year, but it's been over the last few years. Why do you think God chose you to have an uh, amazing parents that raised you right?
well, it was something that we were talking about with our men's group. So we have a men's group every Tuesday from 7:30 to 8:30, right? And here in Carlsbad. And we were talking about this, and I said a statement that rubbed some people the wrong way. I said every single person has the perfect parents. And I said that, and I knew it was going to ruffle some feathers. And I looked around the room and I could see that some of the people were like, that's not the truth.
Hmm.
My parents, struggle with alcohol or drugs or, all the stuff. And I said, but think about it. right? So we serve a God that says that you were perfectly, wonderfully made in the image of God. Anything contrary to that's a lie. From this day forward, only accept truth. Yeah.
Mm.
So if God is big enough to have you exactly where you need to be at the exact right time, I mean, some people would agree, some people wouldn't, but this is just what I believe.
Mm-hmm.
If he's big enough to do that, then every situation that he's ever put you in was perfect based off of either the lesson you need to learn or the thing you need to appreciate and be grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
And so that way, every one of us has the perfect parents, because there's people who had parents that were absolutely horrible to them. But you know what? It forged them into the person that they are right now. And now they can be a messenger of hope and light to people who are in those situations. Now, when I talk about my parents and talk about how awesome they are, I'm not telling you that I had a Beaver Cleaver scenario. We had alcohol abuse, drug abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. We had all those things in our family. But the one thing that I saw with both my parents, my mama was a prayer warrior, right? And my pops was an encouragement warrior.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they lacked in money or resources or anything like that, they made up for in encouragement and love and prayer. And so I think that those are the big ones, because I think a lot of times when a person, I've had people tune out. I've had people not listen to the podcast anymore because they're like, you know what, your parents, it sounds like you just had, just this, Beaver Cleaver type of upbringing, and I don't relate to it. And what I had to tell them is like, it was the things that I took from it,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and we had, I mean, we were the only kids in high school, and everyone has the wow story, and it's not to compare to anybody else's, but I mean, I was the kid in high school that, didn't have clothes, from sixth grade to the time I graduated from high school. Like I didn't get cool clothes. I just had to do hand me downs or buy at the thrift store that my mom, this was before it was vintage. So I want every person out there to understand that your situation is absolutely unique, that you were perfectly, wonderfully made in the image of God. And from this day forward, don't accept anything else but that. And what was great for me with my parents is they would tell me all the time that they, I would ask them a question and they would tell me that they didn't know the answer, but they knew someone who did. And they would direct my eyes to the Lord. And I realized why they did this is because they knew they were going to check out early. They were going to pass away early and they were going to go to be in heaven with Jesus. And when they did, I was going to spend most of my life without them. But I wasn't going to be fatherless and I wasn't going to be motherless, because they directed my eyes to the Lord and got me in the word, and that word will come alive.
Mm. Sheesh.
So again, none of that stuff comes from judgment. It just comes from study. Like, and I'll show you, I'll show you. And this is not a flex at all. It would be the weirdest flex of all time if it was. But when we talked about reps, right? When we talk about Proverbs, I read the corresponding proverb for the corresponding day, and then I do it on the podcast. So, that's the word.
Wow.
Okay. So when I say it and I go back to that, that's the word. So that's the reps. So
You're
the reason,
writing. You're writing all within it.
yeah. So the reason why I talk about Proverbs or that I speak on is because I study it, and I've studied for the last 30 years, corresponding proverb, corresponding day. So when you're looking at that, text, right,
Yeah. Wow.
that's reps.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're putting those things in, and it's amazing because when you start to read the word will start to read you,
Yeah.
right? I haven't shared this yet. I'll share it today, but
We got an
if
exclusive.
if you want a little preview, so this was today, right? So it was Proverbs. We're on the 26th, right?
Yep.
So this is the 26th. So my pop said to me, "You're the greatest, so act accordingly." And but that's a big statement, right? And again, the consumable, like the overarching is your heart set, your mindset, and your skill set, right? How can we apply it today? What are you concerned with? What do you wish that would happen? What are you willing to do? That's a daily, like a moment by moment. The overarching for me always from my pops was, "You're the greatest, so act accordingly." Well, that can be a large thing to take on.
Mm-hmm.
In Proverbs 26 today, when I read this, this is what God translated for me is you're the greatest, so act accordingly. Here's the components of greatness. Number 1, honorable. Number 2, discipline. Number 3, discretion. Number 4, wisdom. Number 5, diligence. Number 6, insight. And number 7, humility. And they're all backed by verses. So honorable is verse 1. Discipline is verse 3. Verse 4 and 5 is discretion and timing. Wisdom is verse 6 and 7. Diligence is verse 8 through 10. Insight, verse 11. And humility is 12. The second one in this, you're the greatest, so act accordingly. What is greatness? It's work ethic. We talked about that from verse 13 to 16. It's mind your business, work your land. We talked about that. Don't work somebody else's land because you'll get frustrated. Work your land. What were you purposed to do? Right? And that's in verse 17. Speak life, which we talked about. Use somebody's specific name and breathe life into them. What do you think that they could do? That's verse 18 through 22. It's always a heart condition. We talked about that. Don't think about the skills that you're going to do today. Don't think about how you're going to change your mindset. Stop for a second and think, where's my heart at? What is my heart condition right now? Because if you build your mind and your skills on a weak foundation, it will crumble anyway. And we see this happen all over. People get the money, they get the business, they get the I'm cold plunging and hot plunging and doing all this stuff. And then at some point they're empty inside their heart. And then they have to reconstruct everything. Why not just construct it right the first time? Right. And then, so it's a heart condition. And then lastly is, get this, listen, accept, speak, and walk in greatness that you were built for. But hear it again.
Yes.
Listen to it first. Where do you listen to it? From the Word of God. How do we spend time in the Word of God? We read it. When we read it out loud, we'll have to listen to it. So listen. When you listen to it enough times, you'll accept it. But before you accept it, you can't speak it. And once you speak it, then you have to walk it. And when you do that, and you do that in the greatness that you were built for, that's in verse 28, it comes back to the fact that you accept the fact that you're the greatest, Nico. So act according to that greatness, and all those things will work out.
Wow.
That's exclusive. Like that hasn't even dropped today. And that's my notes there from today, right? So
that's your notes from Proverbs 26.
This is my notes. This is Proverbs 26. So when you read the corresponding proverb for the corresponding day, you'll read it, then it'll read you. Yeah. It's 3,000-year-old wisdom that literally is applicable in and we just created the playlist, right, on Spotify. So now the wisdom and the vibe is the playlist, and you could just listen to it. 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. You could listen on your walk every day, the corresponding proverb, corresponding day. I tell you. And what's amazing is in January 6th, I read the exact same text as February 6th, as March 6th, as April 6th. And you know what? It all read different. Why? Because I'm in a different place in my life and different circumstances that happen. Yeah. And I tell you, when you get into the principle-based part of wisdom, and what is wisdom? It's the right use of knowledge, right? There's no reason to get all this knowledge of the world unless you have the right use of it. Where do we get the wisdom? The only way, the beginning of wisdom, what God says is the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. And it's not fear and trembling. It's simply the respect. And how can I respect God? By spending time with him and seeing that his actions, his words, and his heart and his mind is all in line. And what happens is when I respect him, I get wisdom, which is the right use of knowledge. Then I get knowledge. Then I get understanding. Then I get insight. Then I get discretion. Then I get discipline. Then I get strength, which leads me right back to fearing and respecting him, which will get me more wisdom.
Sounds like you've been studying this stuff for a little bit.
Dude, I love it, man. I mean, it's, but it has to be in real time, and it has to be yours. Like you have to own it. And that's why the more and more that you spend time, you read it and then it'll read you. It's amazing the way that it'll happen.
Dang. You've definitely inspired me to dive deeper into that.
Well, I tell you, hop with me, man. I'll send you the link over for the playlist.
Yeah.
There's already, I think, 78 episodes in there, 78 episodes, and you literally just turn it on. Now, understand, Nico, it's my interpretation,
Mm.
but God will deal with you different based off your circumstances in that day. And the word and the text will read different that way. But I tell you, the best thing you could do is get a pen and a paper and write. I write in the word, which some people are like, oh, that's sacrilege. No, I don't do it for a religion or a ritual. I do it because I want a relationship, right? And my parents always taught me, like, I don't know, but I know someone who does. And when you study wisdom, I tell you, everything slows down because you're not in a
Mm.
hurry, because you're not worried like, oh man, if I don't make this deal, I'm going to miss out. What wisdom says is, slow and steady, right? Slow and steady. Understand it. Get the knowledge of it, understand it, get insight in it, have discretion, be able to peel back, say that's a good deal, but is it for me? And then to have the discipline to be like, I'm going to, even if it comes up 20 times, because the email hit me 20 times and it looks real good, that I got the discipline to do it. And then you add strength to that. And that's where you start. I mean, I tell you, the world starts to slow down, when we focus on the things that we really need to.
Mm. I'm even sensing like it's slowing down right now as you're talking about it in the middle of this conversation. And it's cool. It's so cool to see how passionate you are about it. Because I mean, we've had a great conversation, but I would say like just I can sense that your excitement and your enthusiasm just turned up just a little bit more as we started talking about Proverbs, and I just think that's so cool. And it's cool because I know I've kind of mentioned my mom a time or two. She's just had a really strong influence on my life, and I kind of like I grew up Christian, and then kind of strayed away a little bit. Just I felt it was like boring. That's the best way I could describe it. But come to find out, my mom and even my aunt had been praying for me for years
Mm-hmm.
and they wanted me to come back to God and have all these things happen in my life where there would be no indisputable evidence that it was God. And it just seems like everybody I meet that like I admire and look up to and I'm inspired by it, they're all deep in the word.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, oh, thanks, mom.
Well, I would love to meet your mom at some point. I think it's amazing. And moms, um, they pray like nobody else.
Mhm.
I mean, mom, being a prayer warrior is massive, and I think it's an example that we can all learn from. You know, if we pray for someone, and my pops was big on this, is like if someone said, "Hey, I need prayer for this," he would stop, pray for him right then, like with them right then in the moment. Let's pray
Mm.
right now.
Yeah.
And this was a thing that in our men's group, what we've challenged our men to do is to do that. If someone calls out, like I just had it yesterday, I was at my daughter's opening for Catch Me If You Can. She's in a musical for her school. And it was awesome. It was great. And I went to the restroom and I got hit on Instagram, and a guy named Nat, you know who you are. He said, "Hey, man, just want to let you know the daily podcasts really mean a lot to me. And I was dealing with a back surgery and I was kind of scared of it. But a thing that you talked about on the top of the hill in the valley, when you talked about that, it really resonated with me. And so I sent him a message, thank you so much, video, but then it was on my heart and it was like, no, pray for this guy.
Mm.
So I popped the video on and just said, hey, I want to pray for Nat right now and pray for his back surgery. And I'll lift him up in Jesus' name, amen. And I sent him the video. You just never know. You never know where someone's at, right?
Mhm.
And your prayer could save someone's life today. And when you get weary, which I do at times, there's been times where I've been like, put out an episode and I'm been like, not that many people listen to it.
Yeah.
And God is like, what if it was just one? Or what if it was you that needed to hear it, right?
Mhm.
And so we can bless so many people. Um, you know, we can bless so many people by the simple little things, speaking life to people. But if you want to speak life, your heart's got to be full of that life. And how do we get
Mhm.
our heart full of that life? As we see and hear and become aware of things through our senses that are wisdom that is filling us up. And I choose to do it through the word.
Mm. So good. So let me ask you this then. Like, what's your take on like vision and like making decisions on like this is where I feel that I'm going, where I'm meant to be, whether that's speaking or whatever other type of goals. Like, how do you find the balance of like, hey, I'm making a commitment to, and I'm having the discipline to go after this, but it's also, you know, it's in God's hands. Because I listened to, I forget, one of your podcast episodes. I think it was with a different guy, and you said something about leave some room, and that really resonated with me because there's even a worship song at my church called "Leave Some Room," and I blast it. It's a really good song,
Hmm.
but that's the whole thing is like leave some room because that's like the mystery of life. That's you allow God to work.
It's probably where I struggle the most, and that's the reason probably why you get a chance to ask the question. Is because I'm a systems guy.
Hmm.
There's a lot of times where I try and systemize God, and he ain't
Mm.
having it. He ain't having it. I can be inspired by Moses going to the Red Sea, parting it, and walking through on dry ground.
Hmm.
But if I go over to the Red Sea right now and I'm like, this is how you're supposed to bless me, God, put a staff in the ground, most likely I'm drowned in the Red Sea. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Because it was an example or an inspiration, but it wasn't my story. And this is where I find that I get off a lot, like I get off track a lot, is because I'll see people, the comparison, right? Well, my mom told me, I'll look and I'll be like, yo, they did it this way. Therefore, if I do it this way, I'll get that result.
Hmm.
But I don't look into all the ingredients in the cake. And, so I'm looking at the cake and being like, yo, I want that. But I'm not looking at when we go back to the reps part, right? And you said, talk about, charging a lot for something, but there was a time where I just did that always for free. And I did as many, and I showed up at places where other people weren't willing to. And I got to do the things that, if you do the things that you need to do when you need to do them, you'll get to do the things that you want to do when you want to do them. Right.
Hmm.
But again, that's a system. So what God has been big with me on is give us this day our daily bread. Don't give us this week. Don't give us this year. Don't give us a
Hmm.
5-year plan. Give us this day. And it's tough. And so, from my standpoint, I have 2 kids, 12 and 15. I want to have stability. I want to have those things. Now, I need to be a good steward of the blessings that God brings into my life. Absolutely 100%.
Yeah.
But I could tell you this, every single thing, every single good thing that has happened in my life, every single thing, there's no way I could have planned for it. Say, for instance, I'll tell you when we bought the business here in San Diego, I wanted a place. I got one in Carlsbad. I wanted it in La Jolla. I had a plan. I locked into La Jolla. I had the contract, and then the guy backed out on the contract, and my wife was frustrated. I looked on Craigslist, and bang, there's a business. And the business just so happens to have a 1,700 square foot loft above it where we can live. I was trying for something
Hmm.
and forcing it. And then God was like, you can keep forcing it. I'll give you that thing, although it's not going to be what I had for you. And then you're going to beat your head against the wall and learn a system, right? A screw up. And I tell you, every time that I leave him room, it's amazing. Like think of this, the Sport Clips, a keynote that I'm doing,
Hmm.
in next week. I think it was 2001. My friend named Gary Spellman called me while he was in Vegas. I was working in Vegas. He called me and said, hey man, I want you to come down and hang with me at this convention. I marked myself out. I went and I just volunteered my time with him. 2001. 2018, I'm a speaker, but their main keynote is Mel Robbins.
Hmm.
And I see, wow, this company's hiring in people like Mel Robbins. I'd like to be there someday. 2024, I'm the keynote speaker for that. You got to give God room in 2001, I didn't know that going to that convention, making some relationships and connecting with a couple of people would do that. And nor can I tell someone, if you go to this conference and you do this, that's why most of collaboration that I see happens before the true connection happens. It goes connection, contribution,
Mm.
and then collaboration. But be weary if someone wants to collaborate too early. I've seen this with my friend James Dixon. Everybody wants to collaborate with James Dixon,
Sure.
but they haven't made a connection to him. They
Mm.
haven't contributed to him, added value to him. Therefore, the collaboration is not there. But when you
Mm.
connect, you collaborate, you add value, and then someone asks you, again, that's when it's curtains. That's when things can really happen.
Curtains. I like that phrase. Curtains.
Maybe the kids will pick up on that. I don't think so, but my son,
We'll do our best. We'll
yeah,
see.
exactly. I'm standing on business, baby. I'm just joking with you.
And I think we'll kind of start wrapping up here,
Yeah.
but I would love to just ask you this question. I want to see where you take it. What is your vision?
Being exactly where God has me to be on that particular day. And this has been the hardest thing ever, man. I mean, the toughest thing ever is the simplest thing. You know, when the pandemic hit, he was like, God was just like, I want you to sit down. I want you to take your chair to the beach. I want you to spend time with me and I will prepare you.
Mm.
And so every single morning, like it's getting up, getting in the word. And sometimes what's wild about it, Nico, is some people would be like, oh, wow, Kelly, that's a system. Can I do it? Yeah, but some days he takes me to the beach to read in my Tommy Bahama chair, which I love. Some days he says, get up, walk around the neighborhood and spend time with me there. Sometimes he says, get up and ride your bike. And I ride my bike and I have church on the bike. And it comes back to a story that my pops told me, or a experience that I had with him. I called him and I said, you know, I feel really bad. He said, why? And I said, I'm really down. He said, why? And I said, well, because I hadn't been to church in like, 6 weeks. And he's like, well, what have you been doing? I said, sometimes I'm riding my bike. Sometimes I'm doing this. And he's like, church was on the bike. Church was in the hike. Church was walking around the neighborhood. He said, so don't ever feel bad because you're spending time with God. That's where he had you to be because he's big enough. And I was like, whoa, right?
Mm.
And so as opposed to me regimenting and saying that I have to do this thing, because what happens is sometimes we get a routine, that routine becomes a religion, that routine becomes a ritual, and that ritual becomes a religion that we worship.
Mm.
But God doesn't want us to worship anything but him. And he only has for us on that day what he has for us on that day. And the only way that we can know that is if we stay in communication with him. And that's, I mean, when we truly, and when it comes back to where we started, right? How can you truly be present in that scenario? You got to believe it first, right? You got to believe it first. And then it'll seep into your mind, then it'll seep into your actions. But if you could spend time, like for me, my vision, and it's hard, my vision is exactly what God would have for me on that particular day.
Mm.
And he shows it to be true every single time. You know, none of my speaking engagements have ever come from social media.
Mm.
None. None have come from running ads. You know where they came from? My last speaking engagement with one of the top real estate conferences in the world, Spring Break. You know where it came from?
Mm.
My wife, growing up in 6th grade, met a girl named Sadie. Sadie had a friend named Spring.
Okay.
My wife met Spring in about 8th or 9th grade. Spring ended up getting burned up on a boat when she was like 19 or 21 years old, which caused her resilience to be at such a high level that she worked so hard in the real estate business to become the #1 in all of Utah. And guess what she created? A conference called Spring B. And guess who she asked to be the keynote?
Let's go.
And then NiftyCon. Because Spring got burned up on the boat, met my wife at that time, then became the top in real estate, and now is one of the top real estate coaches in the world, working with Ben Kinney. Someone in the audience at that had a husband who worked with NiftyCon. And now the keynote for NiftyCon is your boy. So it's an ego check because I would like to tell God, like, look what I did.
Mm-hmm.
Let me show you. Let me show you this system.
Mm.
Let me show you this system on how I can, get more views and more likes and connect with. Or I could ask God, what would you have me to do today?
Mm-hmm.
And then the hardest thing is do it.
So how do you remind yourself of that vision?
I think a lot of times it's from screwing up. So because I'll take it into my own hands and I'll be like, yo, I got this. I don't, I got the system or whatever it is. And God just shows me like, and it's not perfect, man. Nothing's a
Mm.
perfect science. We were talking, my buddy and I were talking about this. His name is Jay Shoop. You should have him on the podcast. The dude is phenomenal.
Mm.
But I asked Jay, I was like, some of the sayings that you hear out there, I said, what do you believe about them? And he was like, they're good for a bumper sticker, but they don't apply. And I was like, we started talking about one that's pretty strong. And it's the way you do one thing is the way you do everything.
Mm.
That's not true. I see a lot of fat and sloppy wealthy people.
Mm.
I see a lot of really in shape broke people. I see a lot of people who are phenomenal at what they do, but their family is in shambles.
Mm.
I see a lot of people who are really, amazing with their family and their business doesn't work. So when we look at an absolute, you have to test it for yourself. And this is where in this realm, in this business, the personal development, business, I caution, I just say like, test it out for yourself. Because people will be like, yo, waking up early, you got to dominate the morning. That'll be, test it out. Because I know a lot of billionaires, millionaires, deca millionaires that don't wake up early. You got to try it for yourself. And when you try it, then it shows it to be true. And for me, the study for the last, I gave my heart to the Lord when I was 9. So I've been, at this for like 40 years, and not strong at it for 40 years, but really, in the word for, let's call it 30 years. I could give you 100,000 examples of every single thing that has worked. Although if it's not your story and you're inspired by it, you just rent it, test it. We used to call it as kids, they used to call it the Pepsi challenge, right? And the Pepsi challenge was they would blindfold you and have you drink Coke and Pepsi because they knew their product was that good.
Mm.
I believe that the word is that good.
Mm.
I believe that truth and that wisdom is that good. I believe if you put a blindfold on and you tested it,
I think that's so there's a lot of truth there because I until you experience it yourself, like it's everyone there's a million different ways to do it, but it's just you got to find your way in that moment in that season of your life because I think that's the case too is like I've had a lot of different ways I've crafted my life and at different seasons based on what the goals were or what just kind of what phase I was in. So I don't, and I used to think that it was more rigid, where it's like, hey, this is exactly how it goes, and this is, what made me so great. So you guys should try this, and it's just like, no, like everyone gets to try it and do it the way that resonates with them and feels the best to them and works the best for them.
well, and I think if you really just step back and you study it, right? You look at kids. Kids are free and they have a really, really good time. Once we get past being a kid into our 20s up to our 40s, we strive and try and do all this stuff and honestly do a lot of boneheaded stuff. Then we get into our 50s, 50s and 60s and we don't care. And we start doing what we love anyway. So just avoid the middle. When we're kids and we think, oh my gosh, when I get this, when I get that, I'm going to do this. And then when we get to the point where we get all that stuff, we go back to being like kids anyway. So first of our life, we got it. At the end of our life, we got it. It's just the middle we need to avoid. And you could do this. You could apply that in business. You could apply that in relationships. You know, that's the guy with the shiny suit and the car or the Axe body spray that's coming out to try and sell you the car. That dude is from 20 to 40.
Or an Ed Hardy.
I'm probably not going to get sponsored by Ed Hardy now. So,
well, maybe it's not meant to be. Well, Kelly, I appreciate you. As mentioned, we do have a little gift for you.
I'm in, man. I love gifts.
So, in case you wanted to maybe have a way that could remind you of your vision a little bit, we talked to your future self. He came back. He wanted to tell you a few things, and I was going to relay it, but he said he wanted to tell you it directly. That's okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Hey, Kelly. It's me. It's you. The future you. I'm so excited for you to get here. But I'm equally, if not more, pumped for you to embrace every moment until you do get here. It's cool to see how passionate, resilient, and present you are. I'm excited for you to see who you've become and all you've created. Yeah, the optimal health and energy that had you feeling younger and younger every single day. The wealth you built that gave you the freedom and abundance you had always desired. The loving and committed relationships that filled your heart with so much joy. The way you slowed down, you stayed present, you stayed awesome, you stayed in your purpose. You got to play the game at the fair until you won. Kelly, I love you. I love who you are. I love who you've always been. And I love who you're constantly becoming. Now get up and make it a great day.
Thank you, man.
You're welcome. Thank you, man. Like this is amazing. I remember when I started my podcast, and I just remember I was like, if I could make a ton of money just having cool conversations with cool people, I was like, sign me up. And it's just been such a joy. And like I said, I'm very perceptive. I'm very empathetic. I can feel, and I get a sense for people really quickly. And it was just so cool when I saw you on stage and you were just talking about different things, but I could, just your vibe. I was like, I would love to sit down and have a conversation with him. And here we are.
I appreciate you, man. You're incredible. And, continue to do what it is that you're doing. You're making you're making a difference, in people's lives. You really, really are. And I appreciate you, man.
Thank you. What, do you have any asks? And I can leave that open. And then also, where I also will guide people to is, even if it's just like, you have an ask of me, do you have an ask of the audience? What do you want people to get out of this episode? Like, share what's on your heart.
I think that, check out the podcast. I think it would be cool if you did. But most of all, take the Pepsi challenge, test it. Like every one of you has a purpose, that was designed. And if you go to the source, he'll help you on that realm. And, I've just, my hat's off to you, man. I appreciate it. My ask is that every one of you guys be my friend for the rest of your life. That's it. Because I believe if we're friends, we don't have to be in a rush for anything.
Amen. Cool, brother. Well, yeah, we'll obviously put all the links in the show notes and everything, and make sure people come check you out and go check out the vibe. Are you seeing this where there's like fireworks going off on your screen?
I saw that. I think it's because I go like that. Did I do that?
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
It's
I
happened
believe
like 3 times, and
I think it's the reaction. What happens if I go like this? Let's see that one.
I think I got the thumbs up. Yeah, I got thumbs up.
Okay, thumbs up. Did it? Yeah.
That's
Okay.
happened like 3 times, and like you were in some really deep thoughts, and I didn't want to distract you. But
No, I saw.
what is
I
going on?
saw it. I was like, wow, people are responding. I think it's the software.
Yeah.
I think it's the software to it, but I guess I guess that could work out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How can I
we'll play-
serve you, man?
we'll
How can
play
I
it.
contribute to you?
Man, if you think there's any other, I know you mentioned a couple people that might be good guests for the podcast. We're always looking
Yeah.
for cool new people to connect with. We're gearing up for our next podcast event on the 11th. You're obviously more than welcome to come. I know you got a lot going on, but that invitation is always open, and who knows, like potentially maybe even we could, if it feels aligned, we could definitely have that conversation, or maybe even throwing an event together. That could be kind of cool. So
Yeah.
I just want to continue to build the relationship and just support you in the best way that I can.
That's awesome, man. Well, I'm proud of you. I'm proud to be your friend, man. And you're incredible. You're great at what you do.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.